All right, let's get started, inshallah ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا ولنا ينفعنا وزدنا علما يا كريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وشفاء لكل داء آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah ta'ala. Inshallah, all of you are doing well here and those who are online. Welcome to the 16th session of our journey through the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This will be our concluding class on this topic. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll be ending today. And then my intention is to hopefully, because I'm not 100% set on it, to continue with the life of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu afterwards. And then if I can move on after to Umar. It's going to take a lot of good research, though, to put the classes together, though. That's why I'm a little hesitant. But inshallah ta'ala, that's my plan. I haven't done that yet. And I think that'll be kind of good to kind of follow along, if you will. A lot of people like to know the history of what actually happened. So anyhow, last week we were talking about, the Battle of Tabuk last time. We talked about the Battle of Hunain also. And so now when the Prophet ﷺ came back from the Battle of Hunain, the Battle of Tabuk, which was in the 9th year, we talked about what really wasn't a battle, but it was more that the Roman Empire did not show up. And so it made a victory for the Muslims, and they were able to expand their empire going outwardly. The Prophet ﷺ made the agreements with some of the tribes out there that they would pay jizya, a tax, so the Muslim state will defend them. And technically that kind of expands their borders, if you will, all the way up to almost the lands of Palestine. And so now we're in the 10th year now, okay? And so then the 10th year comes around here. It's finally made obligatory the last pillar of Islam, and that is Hajj. So in the last year, now the Prophet ﷺ gets the confirmation that Hajj now is obligatory. Now, in the 9th year, if you remember, in the 9th year, if you remember, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu led a group of Muslims in Hajj. And you were wondering, why did the Prophet not go in that time? Well, number one, it was not obligatory. And number two, the Prophet didn't want to be around the mushrikeen because the polytheists were still allowed to go to the Kaaba and have their idols and walk, mentioned that some of them will walk around naked and all these kind of, just not a very good, sight. And so the Prophet didn't really want to be around with that type of, atmosphere. And then after Abu Bakr made Hajj, and the verses came down that the polytheists are no longer to make Hajj anymore. It's over now. And so that's why he's making it in this year. And also now it's becomes obligatory. Okay. So the Prophet makes the intention to make Hajj. Once he does that, everyone wants to go along. I mean, we will do the same thing, right? So now the Prophet is going to make Hajj. Everyone wants to jump on and go with him. That would be such a great journey. All the different tribes around Arabia who now are Muslim, especially when Mecca fell, so many people became Muslim. They all started coming along. And so the Prophet ﷺ goes out and he goes leaves Medina. He goes to this place called Dhul Hulayfa. Only reason why I bring this up is that if any of you go to perform Umrah, and a lot of time Umrah trips start in Medina. If you go to Medina first, usually the bus will take you to this place called Dhul Hulayfa, and that's Dhul Hulayfa right there. And that is where the Prophet himself, when he went to go make Hajj, he stopped there, left Medina, went here. It's like a 15-minute bus ride. And then he put on his ihram, and then he made his intention to go make Hajj. So Dhul Hulayfa, for the people of Medina, we call this thing a miqat. Miqat is like a borderline that once you cross it and I have the intention to perform Umrah or Hajj, you have to be in the state of ihram with those white garments. If you're not in there, then you have to go back. You have to cross over the line, put on the ihram, make your intention for Hajj or Umrah, and then cross the line over. So it's a little bit detailed. So there's a borderline all around Mecca, whether you're coming from the Red Sea to Jeddah, you're coming from Iraq, or coming from any other place, they have this thing called the Miqat, right? So there's a lot of buses here that go there, and ends up being a lot of issues that we all stop there. We make our intention for Umrah, we pray 2 rakats there, because the Prophet prayed 2 rakats there, he spent the night there. There's a little bit of a discussion if that's a sunnah to do so or not, nonetheless, and then you leave. And this is a part, unfortunately, that a lot of people get lost. Like my last Umrah group, we lost, we're looking for one person for about an hour. They could not find where the bus was. And so, but anyhow, it's one of the things to do because the Prophet did it, and people want to follow the same way the Prophet did, then that's good to do. So the Prophet, after leaving Medina, goes into all the way to Mecca, does Umrah, does the Tawaf, does the Sa'i, and then he goes to Mina, and he has 124,000 people with him. Now that is a lot of people, okay? That's a lot, right? That we just saw recently. So that's how much people are now joining Islam, alhamdulillah, okay? In this Hajj that he does, I don't really cover a lot of it because he does a lot of the rituals of Hajj. He goes to Mina, goes to Arafah, goes to Muzdalifah, stones the Jamarat. So I don't really go into that because it ends up being like a Hajj workshop. But one thing I wanted to go over is at least what he said in his farewell khutbah. So the farewell khutbah is a khutbah that is done on Yawm al-Arafah, the day of Arafah, the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. And that's still done traditionally today. It has nothing to do with a Jummah khutbah. It's just a khutbah that's done on that day, a speech, if you will. And the Prophet ﷺ on Arafah, in this place of Arafah, not necessarily on the mountain of Arafah, even though I have a picture of the mountain of Arafah there, he went and got up and he addresses everyone that's in front of him. That's 124,000 people. Now, how are you going to address everyone? That people would hear it and then they will repeat it after him to the next group. I don't know how many people you have to keep on recycling or chaining together until you finally cover everybody. But he says multiple things in this farewell khutbah. And one of the things he says, oh, people, listen to what I have to say. For I do not know whether I'm going to meet you in this place once again the current year. Now that's a big shock to anybody. Basically, the Prophet is saying that I'm going to come to the end of my life. Okay, so anybody who listens to that statement knows that the Prophet, he's a human being, he's a prophet, but he's coming to the end of his mission. That's going to make you extremely sad. But he's letting the people know that. Okay. Then he says, not number one, but a couple things that he said here, and it's not necessarily in order. He said, fear Allah, be conscious of Allah concerning your women. Verily, you have taken them on the security of Allah, right? By the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. And why would he say that for? Out of all the things that he had to say, is that traditionally, and this might be a bit, debatable, that, women were not treated very well by the men, especially pre-Islam. Okay. They didn't get inheritance. They would be held without giving divorce, or they'll hold them. There's many things that they were done, that was done against them. The baby girls were buried alive because people wanted males in their thing, all these different types of things. So one of the first things the Prophet said is talk about, have consciousness of how you treat your women, whether that is in marriage, whether that is your mothers, whether that's your daughters, your sisters, etc. Okay. Now, does guys need good treatment also? What do you guys think? Amir, what do you think?
You guys
need good treatment also?
Need good treatment. Of course, there's definitely some equality.
Right, we always love that, right? It's always there. But anytime you see statements like this, where the Prophet doesn't address the other gender, it's understood it goes both ways, but there's a need to emphasize women because of what treatment they're getting, because of the abuse that they were getting, right? Which we could argue today that still continue. I'm not talking about the Muslims, I'm talking about just in general in the world, right? Most domestic violence cases are men against women. There's some women against men, but it's be silly to have a whole conference about, don't beat up men, you know what I mean? When the majority of it, unfortunately, is against women, right? So the Prophet is still in it. He's talking about that, how much that needs to be done. That's also not talking about physical, concerns. Talking about, verbal and emotional concerns. Once again, a little bit debated statement, but maybe we could say that women are a little bit more sensitive, emotional than men. Some people might, feminists don't like those type of statements, but anyhow, but so at times, how do you talk to them? And you look at how the Prophet ﷺ argued or talked to Aisha radiallahu anha, very like, he does a very indirect way, very nice and gentle, but still teaching a lesson at the same time. You know what I mean? And other wives that he had, and even his own daughter. Usury, interest is forbidden. Okay. Now listen, especially here in America, I don't like to talk about this topic too much, because some people say you can't do anything in this country without borrowing money. You can get a house, get a car, something, right? Even though now they're opening up a lot of more avenues now to have this quote unquote Islamic financing, and there's a lot to say about that, which companies are doing it more correct than others. I don't want to get too much on that tangent, but generally the Prophet was talking about that this is forbidden. And this is the number one way to, like, honestly, to oppress people and put them down in a hole where they can never get out of, right? Buying a house where you have now $500,000 you need to pay back, $400,000 you need to pay back. And it's interest is on top of that. And so it's much more than $4,000 at the end, right? But you want a house, you need to live in it. So what do you do, right? And how are you ever going to ever pay that back? 30 years, mortgage, this 30 years in your life, you're still paying back, So that was something. And even the Prophet said, like, I'll be the first by remitting the interest which Abbas ibn Abdul Talib has received. His uncle, not him. The Prophet didn't receive it. But he's saying, I'm going to start with my own family. So my family's involved in this. I'm going to give back that money, that interest that was given to me. So now we're going to clean it up. Basically, trying to set an example, right? So somebody will say, I have an interest on my car, I loaned it. I'll be the first one to give that car back and get a used car instead. For example, somebody could do that, right? Some people don't like used cars. Sometimes it comes with more, have a headache. But at least they did it without any interest, right? That's another thing, where you could lease. Verily the lives, your property, and your honor are sacred to one another, like the sanctity of this day of yours, right? So in terms of brotherhood now, the Prophet was talking about brotherhood, right? In terms of your wealth, don't take people out of your other brothers and sisters' wealth, right? Their property, their lives are honored, are sacred from each other. If one is being hurt, that should concern you. What's going on in Gaza today, with our brothers and sisters, their life is sacred, for us as other Muslims. You're a Muslim in a country that's adjacent to that area, right? That is obligatory upon you to help them out, right? O people, your Lord is one, and your father is Adam, is one. There's no virtue of an Arab over a foreigner, and then a foreigner over an Arab, neither over a black over a white, or a white over a black, except by taqwa, righteousness. This came out a lot during the whole Black Lives Matter, coming out. Muslims talk about this a lot. But the Prophet was talking about it 1,400 years ago. Racism has been something the Prophet said also, it's not justifying it. He said, Fakhr bin Nasab, that people having pride of their lineage, I'm Pakistani, I'm Egyptian, I'm Malaysian, right? That I'm better than an Indonesian. I'm better than an Indian. I'm better than a Bangladeshi. I'm better than someone from Saudi Arabia or a Latino, etc. He said, that will remain in my ummah to the day of judgment. He's not saying that's a good thing. He's just saying how people will have so much of a hard time to give that up, right? He's not, he's not condoning it. He's not saying that this, it's okay. It's all right. It's going to happen. Just deal with it. He's just saying that people are going to just have a hard time dealing with it, right? And if I ask any of you guys, is it still in Ummah today? Is it in our masjids today, right? Who is the leader of the masjid? Who is the imam? Is he Pakistani or is he Arab? Is the board, is it more Pakistani the board, the more Indian, or they're Arab, is the Arab board? I don't really go to this masjid, I don't really go to that masjid. And so that's a big issue, And so that is something that we're gonna have to learn to kind of give up. I like to say that my generation, if I could say that, those who were born here in this country, we kind of don't really, I like to say we didn't grow up with that too much, because you kind of grow up in America with Latinos, Indian, Chinese, whites, blacks, you play basketball all together, and that's how it kind of goes, right? But usually when leadership comes, it's a different thing. You can play basketball together, we can eat our food together, but then when it comes to leadership, who's going to be president, then things happen. I like to say our generation doesn't have that as much, but anyhow, but it's something that we have to kind of work with and make sure the Prophet talked about it, because it's going to be a big issue. And imagine this, he's talking to 124,000 people that about 95% of them probably there, if not 99% of them are what? Are Arabs. So he knows they're all one. So you might think that, why did he bring this up for? That they shouldn't have a problem with that. But even the Arabs, as we all know, that would have an issue. Now, I'm not talking about just Arabs, but all cultures have this. That even amongst Arabs, they have this clan, and this clan, and that clan, and clan, they don't want to get together. And Shaitan loves that, called divide and conquer, right? You're Pakistani, but you're from the village. You're from this. You're not from the city. You're not from that. You're Punjabi, I'm Ayman. This kind of like silly things, So anyhow, you're from OC, I'm from Inland Empire. You're from Irvine, so I'm from Santa Ana. It's a little different. We're both from OC though, right? So anyhow, Shaitan loves this type of things. And then the Prophet ﷺ says something that, once again, it gives a big sign that his days are going to be coming to an end, where the verse from Surah Ma'idah is revealed to him. Verse number 3, where it says, "This day I have perfected your religion and completed my favor upon you, and I've chosen for you Islam as your religion." That's it. That is the only religion that's acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other religions might have aspects that are correct in it, charity, and being good to parents. Although with one that has all of that, you don't have to worry about it, then it is the deen of Islam. As we all know, the book has not changed, the scripture is the same, etc. And it's saying that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he heard this statement, everyone was celebrating, like, yes, our religion is Islam, Allah has chosen us. But he started crying. And said, what are you crying for? And he knew that this would mean that the Prophet's life will be coming to an end. So, because if he's saying that, my favor has been completed upon you, that means that there's not much to come up anymore. Another thing I wanted to note here is that some people say if this ayah came down, were there any ayat that came after this that were revealed? Yes. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you completed my favor, you're perfecting your religion, why are there next verses that come after this? Well, in terms of rules and regulations, there's nothing that was known to come after this in terms of halal and haram. But other verses in terms of like character and other stories, etc., those are revealed after this verse. That's one thing that we understand of it. So it's not the last verse that was revealed in the Quran. There's other verses that were revealed after this.
I understand that this verse was revealed. Was it right after the khutbah was given, or?
I believe it was during the khutbah he mentioned this. Yeah, so either it was during the khutbah, or I don't know if it was revealed before that, like exact timing, like 5 minutes before or something like that. And then he mentioned it in the khutbah itself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Does the Prophet, does he ever get revelation? Like, I know that people have seen him like while he's getting revelation, because he's sweating and stuff too. But like in this scenario, is there any narration of like this verse being revealed, like you were saying, like 5 minutes before, during, like people seeing?
Oh, like while you're like talking, all of a sudden.
One in particular, yeah.
That's a good question. Like in time, because usually when it comes down, he said it come down really hard on him. I'm assuming you would have to stop whatever he's doing.
Yeah.
And then I wonder if there's, I don't know of any hadith or story that I know of while he was talking, and then he stopped. Everyone was like, "What's going on?" This other story that people saw him and then knew that revelation was coming on him because of the way that he was feeling and stuff. But in terms of like in a public area, like he was giving a talk and all of a sudden it came down on him. Not that I know of. But that's a good question though. That's interesting.
Who is it that this verse is based as verse 3?
Yeah. That's a great question. So that's great. So if one of the last verses that come down, so the sister was asking that if this is in chapter number 5, Quran has 114 chapters, and this is verse 3, so chapter Ma'idah is actually, Surah Ma'idah is actually quite long. And so how is this at the very beginning? When Surah Ma'idah was revealed, parts of it were revealed earlier. So that's a great question. So, and how did the Prophet know to put it at verse number 3? So that's another thing that brings up a lot of questions on this. So the thing in terms of that the Jibreel alayhi salam would come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam every year in Ramadan, and he would tell him, revise the Quran with him, and what ayahs had been revealed to you, and also the placement of it. So it's understood that when this came down, it was mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the last year of his life in Ramadan, Jibreel came twice and told him and revealed and went over the Quran with him in terms of the placement of it. So that was done either that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him that, or Jibreel came down and told him that. and said, like, put this ayah there, and he would tell the people where to put it. And what do you mean where to put it, right? So one thing we have to know is that some companions were in charge of writing down the scripture of the Quran. So there was well known, there's Zayd bin Thabit, Ka'b ibn Malik, a couple of them were in charge of doing that. So the Prophet would say, we'll tell them, take this ayah and put it here. And then they'll note that and they'll put it down in their mushaf. And that's how they'll know it. That's good. 11th year. Now we're in the 11th year now. So it's understood the Prophet spent 10 years in Medina, but technically it's 10 years and 3 months. So that's why now we're in the 11th year now. Okay. Now we're after, because Hajj we know is in the last month of the Islamic calendar. So now we're moving on to the 11th year. One of the last things the Prophet ﷺ did before passing away is that he made a command, he organized an army and commanded them to head to the lands of Palestine, okay, and pick on the Roman Empire. You can see what his direction is. Okay. And so he assigned Osama bin Zayd ibn Haritha, where he was 18 years old at that time, to lead the army. So he's doing two things here. Number one, he's showing them where the next area of expansion is. The Muslims are already expanded from Mecca, they have Medina, and most of the surrounding Arab small Bedouin tribes. Okay? Yemen hasn't been conquered yet. And so we all know the Battle of Tabuk that happened in the 9th year was against the Roman Empire. So now the Prophet says, like, push up higher now. You go into the lands here, called Balqa, and Darum, of lands close to Palestine. These are cities in Palestine. So to go up there and take that land there. Very important what's kind of going on right now with Gaza and Palestine and so forth. Why that land needs to be under people who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the proper way, right? We all know the great significance of Palestine. I don't need to really go over that with you guys, right? So you see the Prophet, this is one of the last things that he did. So they appointed this army. People had a little bit of issue of joining the army because Zayd bin Haritha is only 18 years old. Abu Bakr is there. Umar is there, right? Uthman. These individuals are much more experienced than him. Well, the second lesson is the Prophet is trying to teach them what about empowering youth, right? And training them to lead on to the next step, right? You have to have that. You have to pass the torch, right? If you don't do that, your community will fall. When that leader dies off, then the community will go down. You see it. I do see that sometimes in some Muslim communities. You have an imam that's been there for so long, and then there's no training underneath that person. And when that person goes, then the community is like, well, no one else was trained, right? And so you have to do that. So there's a reason why he put an 18-year-old as the leader of the army. And Abu Bakr and Umar was part of that army. So he has good backing. You know, if he needs to consult with somebody, he has good people there to consult. Okay? So that's another wisdom of the Prophet, his foresight in terms of what he's looking at. And they gathered, there was one of the largest armies that were gathered in Medina. I couldn't find a number in some of the books I was going to, but then they started gathering on the outskirts of Medina, and then they stopped. Why? Because they got news that the Prophet ﷺ was sick. And so everyone's like, well, how the Prophet of Allah is sick now? How are we going to go out? We don't want to leave. So they just stayed there and they didn't go. So the army actually never left for the battle. They only will leave after when Abu Bakr becomes Khalifa, and he sends them out when he becomes the next Khalifa, if you will. Okay? So they stay there. So this one actually doesn't get implemented. It just gets ready to go. Then we have the signs of the Prophet's life coming to an end. Okay? Obviously, one of the hardest part to go over in the Seerah is to talk about this. Okay? But here is that there's some things that kind of indicated to that. The Prophet getting that his life might come to an end. And number one is that in the 10th year, and I kind of just mentioned that he revealed Quran twice with Jibreel. Never done that before. So why is he doing it now in the 10th year now? Could be that he's not going to make it to the next Ramadan. Also in the 10th year, he spent 20 days in i'tikaf. Usually he always do 10 days, the last 10 nights in i'tikaf, right? It's something that men do. They go in the masjid and they don't leave for 10 days. Okay? And they just pray and they worship, etc. So in the last year, he did 20 days. Okay? Obviously, he loved Masjid Nabawi so much. He loves in the masjid. He did a little bit extra. His words in the farewell Hajj, I might not see you until the next following year. We went over that. It's another indication. Also, one day in midnight, he went out to Al-Baqi' cemetery. Right? If you ever go to Medina, go to Masjid Nabawi, you'll see the big cemetery, the gates that are right next to it. And then he started making dua for the martyrs and the people that are buried there. He never really did that before. It's almost like a farewell type of dua. And then the revelation of Surah Nasr, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ, right? That this victory has come now. You're going to see people coming in waves into the religion, right? So like, right now it's not going to be, people are going to come in. They're going to see the truth now. So that's also a sign. And in the 11th year, the Prophet went out to Uhud mountain, and then he did a farewell prayer for the martyrs that are buried over there now. His uncle was buried there, Hamza, right on. And so for some reason he wanted to go there. So this is all a little bit different than something he never did before. So this is also a sign that, that he might be leaving. Now on Monday, the 29th of Safar, it's reported that the Prophet passed away on the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal. It's a little bit debatable on that date, because that's also the date that he was born on. But that's what the date they kind of, majority of the scholars kind of, come to consensus of, but it's still a little bit debatable still. So this Safar was the month before Rabi al-Awwal, second month of the Islamic calendar. On the 29th of it, once again, he goes to Baqi Cemetery. This is the Baqi Cemetery right there. And this is Masjid Nabawi. That's right there. He goes and makes that dua. On the way back, that's when it started getting an extreme headache, right? And then started getting, temperature starts rising. Okay? And from there on, he would live like around almost 2 weeks, 13 to 14 days after that. So this is kind of like a timeline we're kind of going on there. He goes in, he gets his headache, and one thing that was a norm is that every day he would go to a different wife's house and spend time with them and sleep there, just as fairness. And then he kept on saying, to his wife, where should I spend the night this night? And they got a notice of that he wanted to go to the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. And they took that, and so they said, go ahead, you can go there. Obviously, they see the situation that he's in. And so he stayed in Aisha radiallahu anha's house. If you go to Masjid Nabawi today, you'll see his membar. I think I have a picture later on, where he used to lead the salah, and her house was, I would like to say, maybe from this wall to maybe to that wall. Okay, that's where he led the salah, and then her house was right there. Okay. And so he's really close by to where he used to lead the prayer. All the wives' houses were right there. Call them compartments, actually, hujurat. They're really like a house today. They're like a compartment room, if you will, and there's another one on this side, another one on this side, and most of the wives were all around each other. They all have their own individual housing. On Wednesday, 5 days before the Prophet ﷺ passes away, his temperature rises so high, right? And he has, very, very high fever. That's how it starts. He asks for water to be poured on him. That's one thing to cool you down. Okay? And he does it a couple times, kind of awakes the fever. You get a little sleepy, you'll get unconscious. And then he finally got well enough that he felt like I could go into the masjid. So he entered the masjid. His head was tied with a band, right, just so he could, the headache that he was feeling. He sat on the pulpit and made a speech, like a last kind of sermon to the people. And then he said there, one thing he says, and you can see by his wording what kind of trend he's going to go down. He says, curse of Allah falls upon the Jews and the Christians, for they have made their prophets' tombs a places of worship. What is he trying to say? I'm going to be passing away pretty soon. Don't take my house or my tomb as a place you come here and worship on it, right? That's what the previous people did, right? Especially the Catholic religion. They have a lot of like saints and stuff like that you could pray to and so forth. So he said, do not do that. Curse be Allah upon them because they did this. And do not make my tomb a worship idol. Then he offered himself. And invited people to repay any injuries they've done. So if I've done anything to anybody, then let me know, right? And so some people got up and said, you owe me this much money. They feel embarrassed to ask about something like, you owe me money, but he's asking. So they said, and he ordered some people to pay him back his money. This is where the tradition comes. If you ever see someone at a janazah, they make the announcement, if this person ever owes any money to anybody, please let it know so we can pay him back. Also, because the Prophet said that I don't pray janazah on a body that has a debt. So if you have a debt with somebody, then he wouldn't pray janazah until it was paid off, right? So that's why people start making these announcements of the janazah prayer. So the family will take care of it. So that's the thing. So he goes ahead, he does that. Even the Prophet, he takes care. He doesn't like, he's not, over the law, above the law. He says, no, if someone owes something, then I'll go ahead and pay them back. And then he says, Allah has given his servant, look at the wording here. Allah has given his servant the opportunity to make a choice between whatever he desires of Allah's provisions of this world. That basically you can live in this world and, utilize the food and whatever the world of this world will give you. And what he keeps from in the other world, in the other world, but he has the option for the latter. So you could go into the hereafter. You could go into the hereafter and die now. And so he says that this servant has chosen the latter, is to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. Here Abu Bakr started to cry at that statement. Everyone's like, Abu Bakr, what are you crying for? He's just let us know that a servant is given the option either to live in this world or to join in the hereafter, to die. And what people understood after that, he knew that he was talking about, the Prophet was talking about himself. That the Prophet has chosen to go and die now and be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it said that every prophet was given that option to live with the people or go, right? And then who wouldn't want to go with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I mean, go to the hereafter, of course, right? And then he also ordered that all the gates, the people had their houses around the masjid, okay? And so people had doors that you just walk right into the masjid. And they said, close all the gates that people have from their houses except Abu Bakr's. It's a very indication of what could be the next leader, who's actually the one that has favored for this, this benefit. And so he leaves that door to Abu Bakr from his house is open. They can still walk in. On Thursday, we were talking about Wednesday, 4 days before the death of the Prophet ﷺ, he was suffering through so much pain, where he told the companions, come here, I will cause you to write down something, and that so you will not fall in error after this. It's a pretty big wording, okay? And then when he said that, some people said, guys, don't bother him. Like, look at the pain he's going through. Why are you guys asking to write down thing, or just leave him alone? And some people say, no, we should write it down. He's asked us to write it down. And then they started debating. And so the Prophet says, no, from you guys' argument, just go. And he pushed them away, and that was never written down. Now, what would he have said? Allahu Akbar. Maybe he would have said who the next leader would be. Maybe he would have said this or that, whatever. Right? But he says that you will never fall into error after this. But that was never done. Also shows about arguments, right? Sometimes you see that when some family member is about to pass away, or they're going through. People, naturally it happens, should we take them out of the hospital? Should we keep them in there? Should we do this, procedure? If we do it, they'll probably get worse, And everyone loves their person, but sometimes that's not the best thing to do. It's a very testing time for families. So it was never written down. And then it goes on where the pain was so much that the Prophet ﷺ could not even get up. And after that, I get up and lead the salah. So the last prayer that he did was a Maghrib prayer that he did on this Thursday here. After that, he's going to appoint Abu Bakr radiallahu anh to lead the salah. So he goes and says, Aisha radiallahu anh mentions that the Prophet asked, how the people perform salah? He said, no, they're all standing there. They're standing right there. Look, they're all waiting for you. And so the Prophet said, okay, he brought some water. He tried to wash himself. He wants to lead them in salah, but he faints. So he says, okay, tell Abu Bakr to lead them in salah. Now that's pretty clear who the next leader should be. He didn't say anyone else, right? Out of all the names he could think about, he tells, get Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And Aisha radiallahu anh didn't want to tell her father. So she said, no, I'm not going to tell him. And then the Prophet got kind of mad. He said, why aren't you telling him for? And Aisha said that I don't want that responsibility to be on my father. That he's going to take over the next leader, and then people are going to what? Arguments are going to come. Okay, how are you going to fill the shoes of the Prophet? You're going to come short. 100% you're going to come short, right? So naturally people are going to argue with you or whatever you're going to do. So he thought, I didn't want him to do that. And also he said that when he leads the salah, he cries a lot. So don't pick someone else. So he's trying to kind of get an excuse to pick someone else. And the Prophet said, no, command him to come. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh comes and he leads the salah for the next couple of days here. Some people say it was 17 prayers that he led the Prophet. There was no other companion that led the Prophet in prayer other than, I think there was one, in the Battle of Tabuk. I'm trying to remember his name now. But the rest, all of them were done here by Abu Bakr. The Prophet was never led behind someone else in salah, other than Abu Bakr and the other companion that I'm forgetting now. Okay, so 17 prayers, that's a lot. So the Prophet never changed it. He didn't say, let's try someone else. He kept them there. Very clear. That's a member of the Prophet right there. Obviously, it didn't look like that during his time. It's not marble and so forth. But that's where it is. You can go in this place called the Rawda. I don't know if you've ever been to Masjid Nabawi. They call this place called the Rawda. It's a special area where you go there and pray. The Prophet said the Rawda is like a piece of Jannah from that. It's in my masjid. It's almost like the place of it is from Jannah. So people like to pray there in this area. You used to have green carpets in there. Now they just changed it to red carpets. That's all the same. Just to denote what the Rawda area was. So that's what remember about that. On Saturday, now let's move to Saturday, or Sunday, some have a little different opinion. The Prophet finally felt well. He rested for a while. Remember, he wasn't leading the Salah for about 17 prayers. And then he ordered that 2 people carry him so he can lead the noon prayer, Dhuhr prayer. Okay? So the Prophet led the prayer. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was behind him, and he would do the takbirat. So people couldn't hear his voice because he was so weak. Okay? And then on that Sunday, right, the day before the Prophet passed away, he let go his servants. He let them go. Freed them all that was in the house. Paid the charity, just people that owed it to him. He knows that finally time is coming. Make sure he has nothing that he has that is pending on him. Okay. On the Fajr of the Monday, now this is Rabi al-Awwal, the 14th of Rabi al-Awwal. On that Fajr time, Anas radiallahu anhu says that while the Muslims were performing the Fajr prayer with Abu Bakr, okay, they were surprised because they saw the Prophet ﷺ open his drape. They didn't have like wooden doors, they had curtains. And he moved the curtains so he could see them praying. And if you're there and you know the Prophet's sick and he's in a room like right there, remember, and the lines are right here, and the Abu Bakr is leading you, and every prayer you're wondering, what is the Prophet going to come? Is he beginning to get better? And if that drape moved a little bit in that corner there, guess what your eyes are going to do? You're going to look over there. And so he opened it and he saw them and they saw them and he started smiling. And so they got excited. And, oh, he's good. He's like, look at him, he's smiling, like he's well, right? And so, but right after that, the Prophet passed away. So many times you see that you go to the hospital and like, wow, they're like getting better. They talk to me, and then you get a call that afternoon that they didn't make it. You're like, oh, that makes no sense to me. They're going to release a person. What the, subhanAllah. It's like, it's maybe if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that purposely to have that last kind of moment. Allahu Alam, right? Everyone's different, right? So he opens that curtain, they see him, but he doesn't make the next prayer. He passes away from there. But before that, he does a couple things. Okay. Salah-wise, like I said, you won't make the next salah. But when in the daytime, after the Fajr prayer, he calls his daughter, Fatima, right? Because we all know he loved Fatima very much. It's always thing with the dads and daughters. They always have this kind of special relationship. Mothers and daughters have a special thing, but sometimes with dads and daughters, they have a little, special relationship also. And so Fatima came, and he said, come really close to me. Let me whisper something to you. And she said, what do you have to tell me? And of course, he was kind of sick. He couldn't talk very loud anyhow. And she said something, and she started to cry. And then he said something to her again, and then what? She started to smile. Later on, Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, what did he tell you? I saw you crying, and then I saw you smiling. He said, he told me that that your father will not live any more longer. Of course, if your daughter, right, then you hear that from your father, who the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're going to cry. But then he said that, you would be the next to join me in the next world, in Jannah. And you'll be the leader of the women in Jannah. So she started smiling. Fatima radiallahu anha she passed away 6 months later. So very quick. Okay? I forgot what her age was, but definitely a lot younger than him. But she lived 6 months later, and then she passed away, which is exactly what the Prophet said. He'll be the next one to join me. And then you know how much he loved his grandsons. He didn't have sons, we all know that. They're all taken away from him, they all died in infancy, right? And so Al-Hassan and Hussein, right? I would say they're at least under 10, some age around there. He wants to see his grandson. He's a dad. People forget that he's a dad, right? So he's a grandfather, I should say. So grandfathers like to see their grandchildren. And so he saw them, he hugged them, he embraced them, kissed them, and then told everyone to look after them. And then he saw each one of his wives, right? So obviously they're very important also. So he saw his wives, he talked to them, told them to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, able to spend some time with them. Then while he was in the lap of Aisha radiallahu anha, okay, lying down on this bed of his. Her brother, Abdul Rahman, comes in, and he has a miswak, and he's cleaning his teeth with it. And she could see the Prophet eyeing that. And she could try to say, like, no, yeah, I asked him, do you want that? Do you want the miswak? And he said, yes. And said, okay, give it to him. And then he started to clean his teeth. For him, he's thinking about, you're like, why would you clean your teeth right now? You're like almost gonna, you're in pain. But he's thinking about what? I'm about to meet who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That I would want to speak. That's why he would do it before salah, because the words are, he's talking in prayer, right? And also angels are coming around. He didn't want to push away angels from the bad smell. That's why he recommended for us to brush our teeth or do miswak before the salah, right? And then he said the statement here that he was whispering, and Aisha said, I could barely make out what he was saying, but I was the closest to him. And she said that he was saying, with whom you have bestowed your grace, with the prophets and the truthful one, the Siddiqeen, the martyrs and the good doers. O Allah, forgive me and have mercy upon me, and join me with the highest companion, Ar-Rafiq al-A'la, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Join me with him. Let me be with the Salihin, let me be with the prophets, let me be with those who are truthful. Prophet is way above that, right? But look how this, as a servant of Allah, he's still asking for forgiveness, right? He's, Allah, let me join you, let me join you. Then at intervals, he utters the words, the most exalted companion, Ar-Rafiq al-Ala, to Allah we return, and to him we return back, and that's our last abode. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, right? And the Prophet passes away in that moment, on the lap of Aisha radiallahu anha, right? Imagine that state there, that, we just went over this whole life with the Prophet ﷺ, all the things he's going through, they've all come to an end there. 63 years old, let's say 4 days, or a couple of days, if you will, he passes away. And this is his grave site here. The women don't get to do this, the guys get to do this. The guys get to pass right across this line here, and they give salams on the Prophet ﷺ. It says right here, it says a sign right there, it says Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is where he's buried. And this little sign here, you can't really make it out. It says Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, it says Umar. Umar and Abu Bakr is also buried right next to him. They're like parallel, almost like parallel lines in there. And so that is where his grave is at. This is where the house of Aisha radiallahu anha, where she lived, right? And he passed away in that state there. Anas radiallahu anhu, he says, I've never witnessed a day better and brighter than the day when the Prophet came to Medina. And this is from Medina. Okay? He said, we never saw a day where we had so much hope and aspirations and we were just so joyful. And he said, I never witnessed a day more darker and awful than the day that the Prophet passed away. Right? Imagine that. I mean, one thing about having your father pass away, your mother pass away, but imagine the love they have for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? He's like a father figure. He's their only connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that is now gone, right? And that's why exactly it's mentioned here, where after the death of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Bakr and Umar said, let's go visit Ayman. Ayman is one of the people that was, one of the ladies that took care of the Prophet when he was a baby. As Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to visit her. So said, out of respect, let's go visit her. So as they came to her, she started weeping, started crying. So Abu Bakr says, like, why are you weeping for? He said, what is in store in the next world for Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is better than this world. Don't worry, he's going to Jannah. He has him going with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why are you weeping for? He said, I weep not because I'm ignorant of the fact that what's in store with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is better, but I weep because a revelation which comes from the heavens has ceased. It's no more going to come again. This moved them both to start crying. Abu Bakr and Umar. Abu Bakr and Umar now starts crying. You think about that. From now, there will be never any more revelation. From now up to now, 2023, coming down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That's pretty significant. There'll be never any more. We'll never get any more guidance in terms of, alhamdulillah, we have the Quran and we have preserved it. Right? But we're never going to get anything anymore like that. So she said, we're crying for that. We're not going to get that guidance. We can't ask a question and then get the revelation that comes right after that. That luxury is gone now. So Umar also was stunned at this time. Now he goes a little bit different. Umar goes out and he starts getting mad. If anyone here says that the Prophet passed away, then I will strike them down. How dare you say something like that? So he said, some of the hypocrites claim that the Prophet ﷺ died. They're spreading this rumor. He did not die. And he said what? He said what? Oh, the Messenger did not die. He only went to his Lord just as Musa alayhi salam did. Remember when Musa alayhi salam with the Bani Israel went up to the mountain for 40 days and then he came down? So he said, look how smart Omar is. He actually knows the verses of the Quran. He knows the story very well. Of course he does. Right? He said, no, this is what's happening. Don't worry, he's going to come back. Because he's in a state of pandemonium. He's not even thinking straight very much at all. Right? And that's what he thinks. Right? And then Abu Bakr radiallahu anh comes out and he tells Omar, sit down. Omar, just no more talking, Omar. Right? Don't hit anybody. Don't scare people away. Just sit down. Omar was just going, he's emotionally compromised. Everyone's emotionally compromised at this moment. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh gets up and he says, whoever worships Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad is dead. But whoever worships Allah, Allah is ever living. He does not die and he never dies. And then he recites his ayah from Surah Al Imran. Where it says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ رُسُلٌ أَفَإِن مَّاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ فَقَلِبْتُمْ عَلَى أَعْقَابِكُمْ وَمَن يَنْقَلِبْ عَلَى عَقِبَيْهِ فَلَن يَضُرَّ اللَّهُ شَيْئًا وَسَيَجْزِي اللَّهُ الشَّاكِرِينَ. He said that he recited this verse. He said, oh, Muhammad is not but a messenger. Other messengers have passed before him. So if he was to die or be killed, would you turn your back? Would you change your belief? And he who turns back his heels will never harm Allah at all, but Allah but Allah will reward the grateful, those who are shakirin. The companions mentioned when Abu Bakr radiallahu anh mentioned this ayah, they said as if they never heard that ayah before. They didn't even know, they didn't even remember it because this was sent down during the Battle of Uhud. Remember, the Prophet was hit in the face and he was almost killed in the Battle of Uhud, right? And that was sent down almost like 8 years ago. Oh yeah, 7 years ago or so, right? But he recites this ayah, Abu Bakr. That's why he's a leader, because he knows the Quran. He knows how to address the people with the Quran. Right? And everyone starts, wailing. Obviously, they know that this not wailing, crying. And they know that this is actually it's true. It's not a rumor. It has happened. He has confirmed it. Right? And Omar radiallahu anh said when Abu Bakr recited that verse, he said, I fell down to the ground. Omar is this giant person. All right? Omar fell down to the ground. He said, the reality finally hit me that the Prophet is not alive anymore. It's not alive anymore. And that was very traumatic to experience that moment, to know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not there anymore, subhanAllah, right? All this stuff, the love that we have, is dearer than our own mother and our own father, that he is gone. It's mentioned now that happened on a Monday, that they were so in shock, they didn't know what to do. Imagine you never had a prophet in your life that died in front of you. What are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to bury him? Nobody wanted to touch the body or anything, because they were just afraid of they might do something that's probably not correct. So the body stayed there in the house of Aisha radiallahu anha, right? And people were just so busy in their arguments of what they're supposed to do until the Tuesday came. And they were debating on, janazah, you wash the body, right? You have to remove the clothes for that. But they wouldn't want to do that to the Prophet ﷺ. And nobody would want to see any of his body that's uncovered, because that's something that's very private. So they said, you know what? We're just going to wash him with his clothes on. They took the most respect. That's the easiest way to do it. That might not be the cleanest way to do it, but we're just going to do it because we don't want to remove his clothes at all. So they poured water on his clothes, and they said they rubbed the clothes around like that just to wash him, if you will, to do the ghusl for the body, right? And they did that right there in that bed area there. And then Abu Bakr said, because they didn't know where to bury him, because the Baqi cemetery is close by. Abu Bakr said, I heard that the Prophet said a dead prophet is buried where he dies. Right? It's in the house of Aisha radiallahu. We don't move that body at all. Once again, to the leadership of Abu Bakr radiallahu. So he said, okay. Now he's in a small little room that is Aisha's room. It's a kitchen, it's a bedroom, it's everything all in one. Right? It's a small, like a studio, if you will. So people are saying, how are we going to pray Salat al-Janazah? Right? So that room is so small. So 10 by 10 people will walk in there, pray Salat al-Janazah, and then walk out. Another Jama'ah will come, do Salat al-Janazah. And it said that men went first, then women came, and then they had the young children, etc., who wanted to come after that. They did the janazah too. Everyone wanted to see the Prophet. Of course, he was covered up with the sheets and so forth, right? So they all did, and they prayed Salatul Janazah in that form. It was until Wednesday night, after all this happened, washing and the janazah, then he was buried. One thing is that the Prophet says that with the bodies of prophets, the earth does not eat it. So they remain, like right now, if you would, nobody would do this, though. Dig up any of the prophets' bodies, it will be exactly the way it was, right? Out of a ikram, yani, as a respect for the prophets, that they would not be even seen in that manner. Right? They wouldn't ever be seen in that manner there. So that was the burial there. He was buried right in the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. And it's mentioned that who actually digged the hole and so forth like that, and that's where he was put. Now after that, imagine the pandemonium that's going on. People are now talking about who the next leader should be. Now you're probably saying, hold on, when someone passes away, and let's say if that man had a business, why are people are now talking about who should take over that business? That's disrespectful. Someone just passed away. Why are they even bringing that up? Well, one thing is that when the Arabs, they're only known about leaders, having leaders. So when their main leader died, their next step is who's going to take that responsibility? Because they're almost like sheep. Like we don't know where to go, left, right, or now. We don't have a leader for any split second of our lives. How are we going to know what to do as a group? It's going to cause chaos. Okay, we kind of see that today because we don't have a Khalifa. What's going on in Gaza right now? We're saying, what Muslim leader could say, "Hey, Egyptians, send your army. Turkey, send your army. Pakistan, send your army." We don't have that. We don't have one united leader that could just say one ruling and everyone kind of just follows. That's a problem. With the Ottoman Empire that fell, after World War I, we're in this kind of disarray. We don't even have a leader, which is it's an issue. Inshallah ta'ala, one day we'll have our Khalifa back again, inshallah ta'ala. We can all agree on one. I don't know how that will happen, but hopefully it does, inshallah ta'ala. So the Ansar, remember the Muslims are categorically, they have the Muhajirun, those who migrated from Mecca, and those are already in Medina. They call them the Ansar. So the Ansar, when they heard the death of the Prophet ﷺ, they themselves just pulled away, and they went to this place called the Taqifa Bani Sa'ida, right, which is still an area right now in Medina. You can still see an area of it. It's way in the back of the masjid where a lot of the hotels are at. And this is where they met. So if you ever walk from that area, it'll be like a 15-minute walk to go all the way where the Masjid Nabawi is and to walk all the way back to that area, okay? So the Ansar walked all the way back and they gathered in this area because that's where they kind of made their decisions as a tribe. So that's where they went there. And they started deciding who should be the next Khalifa, the next leader. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar's by the masjid, where the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. And they are, trying to take care of the burial. And someone says, the Ansar are meeting already on deciding who should be the Khalifa. Like, Abu Bakr, you need to go and talk to them. You need to organize them. They can't just separate like that. So he goes out with Umar radiallahu anhu. And so they go over there, they address them, and they see them. And they start discussing a little bit. And so one thing they say is that, they said it was well known that the Muhajirun are less in number than the Ansar, but they had more power and influence. The Ansar was much more greater in number. And the Ansari people in that meeting say, the Khalifa from the Ansar and one Khalifa from the Muhajirun would be the best option. And we all know that's never going to work. You can't have two presidents. It's never going to work, right? But that'll be the most fair. Another one says that this will show a weakness on our part, that we should have we're out more in a big number than them. You see the issues already happening already. We're the Ansar, we're much more than them. They're the Muhajirun, they came from Mecca, they're small in number. We should be the leaders, right? So this whole dialogue starts coming along. Okay? And Abu Bakr says, Omar and Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, are here, choose any one of them. Let them be one of the leaders. Omar is obviously a Muhajir and Abu Ubaidah is from Ansar. So choose one of them. Abu Bakr said, that's the best deal. Look at these two individuals. No one could argue about Omar, no one can argue about Abu Ubaidah right now. So go ahead and pick them. When he says that, Omar gets up and he says, no. Abu Bakr is the most excellent. So one thing about leadership is not about, my name, vote for me. It's about who's actually the best person. And if you know someone's better than you, then you should tell people, don't vote for me. I'm going to ruin your company. I'm going to ruin the masjid. I'm going to do this. Pick someone who has better knowledge and much more responsibility. Okay, it's not about you having your name up on a billboard or etc. Right? She says, no, Abu Bakr is the most excellent among the Muhajirun. And he has been the companion of the Prophet ﷺ in the cave. Remember when they migrated? They went to the cave, and the Prophet only picked Abu Bakr to go with him. He didn't go with anyone else. The Prophet asked him to excuse me. He asked the Prophet ﷺ to affiliate his leading the Muslims in prayer. That he didn't appoint anyone else. It was Abu Bakr that appointed. That's a clear sign. And the prayer is the most superior of all the other articles of faith. Therefore, none is entitled to assume the duties of the caliphate or the khalifa, the khilafah, in the presence of Abu Bakr. Once Omar says that, and everyone's scared to disagree with Omar. So once he said that, everyone just stood quiet, right? And then Omar does this thing where he takes Abu Bakr's hand and says, I give him oath that he's the Khalifa. Once again, when Omar does that, no one's going to try to say anything else after that. He leads by example. Once he does that, everyone else starts taking an oath at this Bani Thaqifa place, right? The Thaqifa of Bani Sa'idah, sorry. Everyone starts taking an oath from him there. All the Ansar and everyone else is there, and they appoint Abu Bakr as the next Khalifa. Now go back to the masjid. No one knows what's going on over there. They don't know they don't know what's happening in this meeting, right? So Abu Bakr goes back to the masjid now and addresses the people. Okay. And he makes his famous statement that he makes in front of everyone there. He says, "Oh people, I've been put in authority over you, and I'm not the best among you. And if I do what's right, then help me. If I do what's wrong, then correct me. Truthfulness is a sacred trust, and lying is a betrayal. The weak among you is strong in my sight, and I will surely try to remove their pain and suffering. And the strong among you is weak to me. I will, if Allah wills, fulfill the rights in full. As long as I obey Allah and His Messenger, you should obey me. If I do not obey Allah and the Messenger, then obedience to me is not obligated upon you. Now stand for Salah and Allah have mercy upon you." So he says that right before, and they perform the Salah. Okay. When he makes a statement, nobody disagrees with him. If you had a time to disagree or bring up and say, sit down, I don't agree with you, no one did it. It was consensus that people agree with him. And people came up to him and held his hand and gave him oath. It was a traditional thing to do back in the day. So everyone gave him oath, and that's how he became the next Khalifa. Now it is true that Ali radiallahu anhu, who was the son-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ, his cousin, married to Fatima radiallahu anha, was not there at that time. And some other members of the family. Nor was Fatima radiallahu anha there. And so they did not give oath to Abu Bakr until 6 months later on. Some people say a couple months later on. And it's mentioned that Ali radiallahu anhu says that, I don't disagree with you of being the next Khalifa, but they were more offended that they were not part of the discussion of who the next Khalifa, as being the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We all see how this thing all played out. It was more like chaos. They're trying to calm the Ansar, and that just played into Abu Bakr becoming it. It wasn't Abu Bakr going there saying, hey, I want you guys to I want to be the next Khalifa. They wanted to go there to make sure that what are they picking? They're already picking another leader. So it kind of happened, on the spot. Omar kind of obviously pushed it, and for good reason, right? And so there's also this thing that some of you guys know the history about the Shia and the Sunni and so forth like this. The Shia don't like Abu Bakr, and he took the Khalifa away from Ali. But Ali, right now, when you look at the history, he doesn't make that statement. Yes, he takes a while to not give back the bay'ah to Abu Bakr, but he finally does. He does do it. He gives it to him, right? So that's 100% established. And even Abu Bakr, when he goes on into his being a Khalifa, he wages different wars against different towns of what some things that were happening during his time. Ali, he participates in that army. He doesn't say, no, you're the Khalifa, I don't recognize you, I'm going to stay home. He participates in those battles under the leadership of Abu Bakr. Ali, and this is even the bigger evidence, Ali even names some of his children Abu Bakr and Omar. If you go today, you'll find, not from Fatima, he had other wives that he had children from, and he named him Abu Bakr. You wouldn't want to name your child after someone you didn't have this hatred from or something like that. You just didn't like them, right? So that is also one of the biggest, rebuttals to some of these comments that Ali didn't like Abu Bakr, blah, blah, blah. That's just people twisting things and later on trying to cause division in the Muslim Ummah. Okay. So he makes that statement there, and he's the next leader, okay? And there's some points here that, well, how do we know Abu Bakr was the most fitted for that? Well, we kind of spoke about it. Number one, that he was a companion on the hijrah we just went over. Point to lead the Muslims on the first Hajj. Remember that in the 9th year? The Prophet didn't appoint anyone to make Hajj, to lead the group. He appointed Abu Bakr. Lead the Muslims in Salah. And also you have this statement here in Sahih Muslim, this hadith here, where a woman asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about something, man. And you get a question, or you wanted to solve an issue, you go to the Prophet. He's the governor, he's the judge, he's the president, he's everything. Okay. And so she goes and asks the Prophet, hey, can you make this decision on this for me? Okay. And then the Prophet told her to come back. I'll give you the answer when you come back. Now she's worried. How if I come back, I don't find you? I need to know what the answer is. So then the Prophet says, what in your opinion should I do if I come, or the lady said, what should I do in my opinion if I come back and I do not find you? And it seemed as if she meant that he might die, that that he might get sick. Then the Prophet says, thereupon, if you do not find me, then come to Abu Bakr. He will make a decision for you. He is the most knowledgeable, the most next leader for you. And so that's another indication that he was the most fitted for this position.
So obviously, like, these are really like key factors to like pointing like who should be the next leader. So for like groups, like groups that say that like Ali is supposed to be like the next leader, do they have like is there any evidence like this, for example, or points to make other than, of course, he's the family member of the Prophet that would argue that he should be the leader and that he's like righteous amongst above others or something?
Yeah. There's it's a hadith that we knowledge that the Prophet said the door of knowledge is with Ali. That's just the door of knowledge. Nonetheless, but it's a big statement. It's an honor statement. Yeah. There's one that it says that the door of knowledge is with Ali or Ilhan. There is a lot of hadith talking about the honor of Ahlul Bayt, the people of the house. You know what I mean? And that comes a little bit. I'm going to have a little further discussion now. That what is when we say Ahlul Bayt, the people of the Prophet's house? Who is that? Now the Shia has a different definition of who is included in that. The Sunnis have different. They're all family, right? Because like I said, the Prophet didn't have just one daughter; he had other daughters. They have other children from other daughters. But for the Shia, it's only Fatima and the lineage of Fatima. No one else. So they narrow it down because then they could get all the sons from Ali. Okay. Well, there's also he had 3 other daughters. They had children also. You know what I mean? And he had cousins and he had, other people too. They're also part of the household. What do you mean by the household? Aisha, his own wife. That's part of the household.
Playing around with the arguments. Actually.
Yeah, and then how they defined it also. Yeah. And the Shia do have their own hadith book, which we don't really acknowledge. So they have their own narrations and stuff like that too, right? But this going back to looking at the actions of Ali, right? It's very clear. He does participate in the army. He does name his children Abu Bakr. He named another child Omar. So so this is kind of fun. I think he might name one Uthman also. So yeah, that's kind of another indication. I'm going to try to get a little bit more into that if we start the life of Abu Bakr inshallah in the next series. I'll get a little bit more into that a little bit. Yeah. Good question. Anyone else had a question?
The slide before this, and this is about Abu Bakr, it says, we are strong and strong are weak.
Yeah, the weak among you is strong in my sight. And I will surely try to remove their pain and suffering. Basically saying so there's like a saying, what I'm understanding, that the weakest link amongst you, those who are like weak amongst you, right? So if you empower them, you're going to make your own ummah stronger, right? So what he's trying to say is that the weak among you is strong in my sight. That they're not they're not someone that we see as belittling, that, they're like nobody. No, they're strong. They're part of it. They're people that should be respected, should be empowered, should be taken care of. That's why he said, I will try to remove their pain and suffering. A lot of people were not well off in Medina. So he's saying that I'm going to be the next leader. I'm not going to try to not recognize you, etc. That's one thing that he's talking about. The one here about the strong among you is weak to me. I'm not too sure exactly what he meant by that. I have to get a little thing. When I was going over it
last night. I didn't 100% understand exactly what he meant by that. That's a good question.
To me, it sounds like, as a leader, right, you're not intimidated by other people who are strong, right? You, of course, you see them as like on your side, of course, but it's just to say that, like, hey, there's like an uprising, something against him, that he's not intimidated by that, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Those who think that they're stronger than him.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's metaphoric, obviously, but in terms of its meaning. Good stuff. Any other questions or comments? It's always the hardest thing to go over this point here. Kind of worried myself how I'll get through it, but I think I did well. Just kind of keep on reading for the lines and kind of moving forward, because obviously extremely emotional if you really want to go through there. The Prophet ﷺ, always someone we love and care, so much. We read his words as our leader. Without that, his words, I mean, the sacrifice actually is one of the biggest things. That, we all went through his whole life of the wars, taking care of the people, his needs over other people. We just we don't have leaders like that anymore in the world like that. And so it's extremely emotional. One thing he did say in the farewell Hajj, he did mention that he told everyone that I will meet you at the Hawd, at this pool of water on Yawm al-Qiyamah. This is a hadith where the Prophet said that I will meet you there, and only the true believers will be able to come there, and he'll be able to get water before the judgment even starts, right? This Hawd, if you will. And so, that's one thing we think about, alhamdulillah, inshallah, when we pass away, all of us will pass away. That one of the biggest news that we all can have, one thing, of course, is seeing our parents and our family members, is to meeting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know what I mean? Of course, seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest reward. But after going through this class, how was this battle when they did this to you, that to you, to sit down and actually talk to them about the Seerah, that would be the greatest thing. So I'll be extremely excited to do that. You know what I mean? Just to meet him and actually, how does he look? For us, we never use pictures. We're always curious, like, how do you look? How was this, this individual? All that he did, subhanAllah, would be extremely beneficial for all of us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us that opportunity, inshallah, to meet the Prophet and drink from his hour, inshallah. If anything else, we'll end with the dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rahman Ya Rahim, Anta salam, wa minka salam, tabaraka ya dhul jalali wal ikram. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala nabiyyina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to place the Prophet sallallahu in your highest ranks in Jannah, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to make us his companions in his rank, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to drink from his hawd and Yawm al-Qiyamah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do not forbid this from us, Ya Kareem, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this whole class that we have done, and we're now ending on the life of your beloved, of your Rasul, we ask you to put us on a scale of hasanat and Yawm al-Qiyamah. Make it a proof for us and make it not a proof against us. Allah, help us follow in the footsteps of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his ibadah, in his khuluq, in his character, how he treated people, how he talked to people, how you care for others, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Ghafur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to give victory for our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Let them overcome their enemies, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help them build back their lives and their homes and their life, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah bless you guys. I'll let you know when the next class starts. I'm going to take a couple weeks off to kind of prepare the material, and then we'll go from there. May Allah reward you guys.